So, Lone Rider here, and just wanted to throw something out there. Sometimes cyclists are talking about roadway safety issues amongst themselves. They don't always agree, whether we're talking about, what your lane position should be in a given situation, or, what kind of bike is best suited to riding on what terrain, or what gear ratio, or what tire size, or whether we're talking about, something like, is a particular bike lane design good or bad? The bike lanes as a whole, are they good in terms of, making cyclists feel safer and getting more people out on bikes? Or is there a downside to them in terms of they create a convention of separation and they basically teach drivers that cyclists don't belong in the rest of the road? And all of these are valid points. There's many different ways to look at a particular thing, especially since it's going to affect different people in different ways, depending on their situation, blah, blah, blah. But the point is basically that cyclists don't necessarily always agree, but that disagreement is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And it's a good thing for one reason and one reason in particular. If people are disagreeing about a topic, it at least means they're talking about it, right? And the interesting thing is, if you look at the three categories of road users, broadly speaking, there's two categories, vehicular road users and non-vehicular road users, meaning pedestrians. But within the category of vehicular road users, you have two people, right? You have the motorized vehicles and then bicycles. So, you have pedestrians, you have cars, i.e. motorized vehicles, and then you have bicycles. The bicycles and the cars, the vehicular road users, the pedestrians, and the non-vehicular road users. Now, here's the thing. Out of those three groups of road users, pedestrians, drivers, and cyclists, who actually spends time debating amongst themselves, whether it's friends at the local bike shop, or whether it's, posting something online, or whether it's, talking to a buddy of yours after, you saw something happen on the road or something happened to you, and then you're like, hey, what should I have done different? Is there anything I could have done different? And all of us have done that, right? There's a bad crash and you're thinking about it, and afterwards you're either talking to somebody, in person, or you call up one of your buddies, and you're like, hey, what? We've all been there, we've all done that. And as cyclists, even if there isn't a bad crash or personal experience, a lot of times these are things we just conceptually understand. You read a newspaper article, something happened to so-and-so, right? And you're like, well, I could see a lot of problems there in that article that, that might have contributed to that. And then you start talking about those as issues of roadway safety that perhaps, if they go beyond that one incident, then they're actually things that occur a lot as a pattern of behavior. Maybe these are things we need to address, right? Or if it's something to do with the infrastructure where that particular incident took place, or maybe that's a dangerous intersection, maybe whatever. The point is, we talk about these things because we think about them, right? I mean, you can take it back to, we disagree with them because we talk about them. But we talk about them because we think about them. We spend time thinking about them. Why do we spend time thinking about them? Because they're important safety issues, and in some cases, life or death issues. Who doesn't spend a lot of time talking about these things? Drivers and pedestrians, right? I mean, occasionally you'll have drivers and pedestrians bitch and moan about bad experiences they had with a perceived rude cyclist. But you very rarely hear drivers and pedestrians talking amongst themselves about general roadway safety issues related to their interaction with other people or with particular infrastructure, and overall, how to make their roadway interactions with other people better and safer, and what they should do differently in the future. Cyclists do this. A lot of other people, including if you look at it, the drivers and the pedestrians, generally speaking, don't. Right? I can't tell you how many times I've been, whether it's, again, at the local bike shop, talking to just a single friend or buddy, or posting something online, where the subject has come up about some aspect of the roads or road interaction relative to the safety of cyclists. We've all done it. We've all seen it happen. We've all been there and done that and got the T-shirt. Now, when was the last time you saw three drivers sitting around at the water cooler? And when I say drivers, I mean drivers who don't also bicycle, because obviously a lot of cyclists also drive, right? But when was the last time you saw three drivers sitting around the water cooler talking about what the proper lane position was to be in while overtaking somebody, let's say, on a bicycle, for safety's sake, in order to make that roadway interaction safer and more efficient? In fact, when was the last time you ever saw three drivers sitting around the water cooler talking about whether or not it was necessarily safe to overtake a cyclist? Because not only is there the question of how much room should you leave and what should your proper lane position be, but there are some times when it's not safe or even legal to overtake a cyclist. For example, if a cyclist is taking the lane while going as fast as car traffic, it's not always going to be safe or even necessarily something that you would even think to do to pass him. When was the last time you saw a driver address that? Right? That not only is there a question of how do you pass safely and efficiently, but that sometimes maybe you shouldn't pass. How do you evaluate which is which? Cyclists discuss these things amongst themselves. Cyclists debate these things heartily. Cyclists argue these things because they matter to us. But they don't just matter to us, they matter to everybody. The difference is we seem to be the only ones talking about them. Again, when was the last time you saw 3 drivers sitting around the water cooler talking about safe road interaction? Whether it was the specifics of overtaking, lane position, the redesign of an intersection and the pros and cons of it for safety, the pros and cons of some specific form of infrastructure, bike lanes or otherwise. All of these things are things that cyclists think about. Because they think about them, they talk about them. Because they talk about them, they don't always necessarily agree. But like I said, the fact that we don't necessarily always agree on something, that's a plus. That means we're talking about it. And somebody should be talking about it because a lot of these issues are important, right? I pick up the newspaper and I read, another cyclist killed in New York. The death toll is now, more than double what it was last year at this time. I have a friend who had a bad experience, nearly got hit by a car. I have been hit by cars, right? And there are just, these things are important to us because they're life and death things. But they're not just life and death things for us, right? I mean, we got 30, 40,000 people killed every year in car wrecks. Other drivers, killed by other drivers. What about them? How come we're the only ones talking about this?